So the key to effective delivery is a strong desire to communicate with your audience. If you really want to be good at giving a speech, you have to care that Ariel understands what you're saying. You have to care that she gets the information. That's really the most important thing in delivery. But to get there, to make it appear that you care about communication, we're going to talk about some details, things that you can actually do. So the first thing I want to talk about is types of delivery. There are 4 types that we'll look at, and I will explain how that affects your speech grade. Then we will talk about the use of voice in delivery, which is just the way that you use the element of your voice, whether it's rate or tone, or how high or how low you speak. It is the matter of your voice, not necessarily the words that you choose, but how you use the instrument of your voice. Then we'll talk about nonverbal delivery, which is everything other than your voice. Nonverbals usually include your tone of voice, but for this purpose, we're going to look at that as body movements, posture, and even dress. So, like I said, the key to effective delivery is the strong desire to communicate with your audience. Delivery is important in your speech. So let's look at the 4 methods of delivery. So let's start there. There are 4 methods. The first one is memorization. This is where I take the paper that I've written and I memorize it word for word. Do you think this is probably a good way to deliver your speech that you have coming up? Why not?
Because then you sound like a robot.
So, 2 major problems with memorization is you could forget. You could get up here and get nervous and you could totally go blank. I don't know if you've ever done that on like a math test. Math was the subject that I did that on quite frequently. I would know everything. I walk in, look at the first question, and all of a sudden it's like I have no idea. So memorization can be bad because you can completely go blank. Memorization can also be bad because if you memorize something, a lot of times you don't memorize it by actually getting up here and pretending you're delivering the speech. You memorize it by reading it over and over again. And you become like my daughter reading the book Brown Bear, right? She's 4, she really can't read, but she has the book memorized, so she goes, Brown Bear, what do you see? And it becomes very sing-song and very, because that's the way that she remembered it. And so you don't necessarily sound like you're really trying to make sure that Angela understands you. You're just giving out that information. Memorization is also really bad because here's the truth. You are students and you are busy. And if you have ever been in a play where you had to memorize lines for a script, you would understand that it takes a lot of time to do that. And there are better ways for you to spend your time than memorizing your speech word for word. If this is what makes you comfortable, though, there is no question on your grade sheet that asks about your delivery style. So if you want to do memorization, you can do that. I would recommend that you bring something printed out in case you have that sudden totally go blank moment, right, Rebecca? So that you can do something different. And what many people will do then is bring a complete manuscript. They'll bring their speech written out word for word, and they will deliver it. Is this a really good way to deliver your speech? Why not?
Because your audience can read.
Because your audience can read. So there are 2 ways that people sometimes do manuscripts. They're either going to put all the words right here on their PowerPoint, and then they're going to turn and read their PowerPoint. And what most people in the middle of those do is go ahead and start doing something else because they think you're going to send me the PowerPoint later and there's no point for me to read it. The other thing that they do is they put it on a sheet of paper like this, and then they come over typically, and they'll stand behind the podium, and they will go, English 112 speech grade, inform your class or about an audience situation and personally appropriate topic. Have a compelling central idea or thesis statement, which is really boring for your audience. Most people are not taught the skill of what we call oral interpretation, which is when someone can read something and make it sound really interesting. So if you've ever been to one of those story times where the person reads the book to you and different characters have a different voice and one person is making all these different voices and they kind of act it out, they are trained in the art of oral interpretation or storytelling. That is a skill that takes a lot of time to learn. And so many times when we write things out, we become very monotone. We also might sound like a robot. And we really sound like we're reading to you and we don't bother looking up. And so there's really no way for me to connect with Bailey if I never look up from my paper. So manuscript is not the best. However, again, there's no question on your grade sheet that addresses this. So if you want to write your speech out word for word and read it, you can do that. There are some other questions that you might have issues with, like eye contact. It's a little bit harder if it's written out word for word to make eye contact with your audience. Impromptu, no worries. You shouldn't do impromptu, right, Dante? Impromptu is where you have little to no time to prepare. It's my understanding that you've had at least 3 weeks that you've known about this presentation, and most of you already have PowerPoint. Some of them I've looked at. So impromptu is little to no time to prepare, and you just get up and talk about something, but we should not be there because you should have known about this presentation and you should be preparing already. And the very last style is called extemporaneous. And extemporaneous is what most of us delivering a speech would do the best with. This is where you prepare and practice, but you don't memorize it word for word and you don't write it out word for word. So I think most of you turned in an outline at some point for some of your work. It's basically having your outline with you so that you remember what you're supposed to talk about, but you don't have your words necessarily planned word for word. Does that make sense? That allows you to glance down and see where you're at, what point you're supposed to be making, and then look up at your audience. Does that make sense? Good news for you guys is this is not a question on your grade sheet, so you can choose any of these you want. I would not think you're really choosing impromptu because most of you, even if you think I didn't practice, you still have prepared some outside. But with extemporaneous, I would practice with that visual aid that you're going to have because it's going to make a difference in how the delivery comes across if you've practiced. And you can memorize it if that's what you're comfortable with, if you're a theater person and you're really comfortable with that. I just would say that's probably more time invested in memorization than you need to. And then manuscripts, you can have it written out word for word, but make sure you're able to look up and make eye contact, which is usually really difficult if it's word for word, especially if it's like in the size that a normal paper would be. You probably need to enlarge your font. You need to figure out ways to cue yourself of where you're at. So that's the first element.